Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this People's Assembly May Day special. We're really pleased that we have such a big audience every Thursday for making sense of the crisis. I'm very, very pleased that you've joined us tonight. I'm sure you're all in very different ways experiencing this global pandemic. We're all in such different situations. Some people are able to stay at home. Some people are exposed to this virus daily, be it they're in key roles or still having to go to work. Lots of people are very, very worried about loved ones, about what's going to happen to our society after the virus. So we wanted tonight, we know that there's this crisis going on, but we wanted tonight to be hopeful too. We know that lots of you who are watching are activists. You give your time up to volunteer, maybe at the mutual aid and support groups. And we wanted this to be about enjoyment too, because this is May Day. This is about a celebration of working people. And we want you to kind of sit back and relax and enjoy the absolutely brilliant guests that we have here tonight. I think there's points of unity that brings everybody on this panel and brings everybody to watch this programme too. I think we all agree that the government are failing the people in their handling of this crisis, be it the failure to test adequate amounts of people, the failure to lock down quick enough to take that decision, the failure in the number of ventilators that we have, the numbers of people that are left destitute because they are sick or because they can't go to work. And I suppose the second point of unity is our celebration, our appreciation for working people, because I don't think there's ever been a more apt time to celebrate working people. Is it the billionaires delivering your post? Is it the billionaires fitting ventilators to unwell people? Is it the billionaires holding the hands of people who are taking their last breath when their loved one can't join them? Is it the billionaires cleaning the virus from your workplace or picking up and dropping our food? No, it's not. It's working people. So today is about working people, those people who are getting us through this crisis. And that second point of unity is that it shall not be working people when we come out of this crisis who should pay for this crisis. So thank you all for joining us. We have some absolutely brilliant guests with us tonight. Maxine Peake is going to be our first performance, but before that, I'm just going to give a little shout out to the next People's Assembly event. So that's going to be on the 7th of May at 6:30. And what we're doing is, I said it on Thursday, we're going to try and break some kind of online world record, because we're going to have a mass rally online where all sections of the movement come together at the same time, 6:30. All sections of the movement are represented. So we are going to ask them to set out some of the problems that they see during this crisis and with society and the system, and some of the demands for coming out of this crisis to a rally call, if you like. So if you're sitting there and you've got loads of followers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever, and you want to lend us your account for that time, for 6:30 on Thursday, then please do, because we want to get to millions and millions of people. I'm really pleased to invite Maxine to be one of our first contributors to tonight. Maxine's an English stage, radio, film and television actress. You'll know her from programmes like Dinner Ladies, and honestly, I have to calm down a little bit about this, Maxine, but my love for Shameless knows no bounds. And if you've not come across Shameless, you've got a treat, because you've got a few box sets to watch there. You played Veronica in Shameless, or the barrister Martha Costello in Silk. You've been on stage in a title role in Hamlet, and you are a socialist, an activist, a member of the Manchester People's Assembly. How are you finding the lockdown, Maxine? How are you finding things?
I've just realised how very, very fortunate I am, really. I mean, I've always known, been very lucky, but just be able to have a house with space, have a garden, have a partner I can spend time with and we get on. Those, well, they're not small things. You realise the big things, really big things that you've got to be, internally grateful for. I've got an elderly father, obviously I'm concerned about, who lives on his own. But it's really made me realise how lucky I am and how much, you depend on other people. just to get through. And it is, like you say, the frontline workers, the supermarket workers, the post people, you know, it's that time to reflect, isn't it? And really realise what makes this country tick, and who are the, you know, the veins in this country. It's the workers.
You're absolutely right. And yeah, I think, I mean, to have no outside space, and we know there are so many people with no outside space, and as you say, some people aren't safe at home, so we can be fortunate and fight for all those who deserve better, essentially.
Yeah, and I feel sometimes there's judgment going on about, you know, and I think you've got to take everybody's, you know, situation really individually. You know, people saying, oh, there's people on parks, there's people, well, you know what I mean? I just think you don't know what, if you're stuck in a tiny flat with no way out of that, you know what I mean? Everybody's, it's so difficult. It's so difficult for so many people. Somebody put a brilliant quote on, I think it was on social media the other day, saying, you know, we're all in a storm. Some of us are on, you know, cruise liners, and some of us are in dinghies. And it really has thrown up a huge, you know, deficit financially between, you know, society in this country.
You're absolutely right. And as always, you know, the system exposes those huge inequalities when we are thrown into a crisis. Maxine, I know you have been doing so much, and you can't stay with us for the whole programme. So I want to hand over to you now. And before you go, just to say thank you, honestly, on behalf of the People's Assembly, for your activism, for your socialism, for your commitment to the cause. So over to you, Maxine.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you. So I'm just going to do a reading. It's a poem. It's a worker reads history, and it's Bertolt Brecht. Now, I do have to apologise because there's no mention of the amazing female contribution here, but we shall ignore that. Anyway, it's called A Worker Reads History, and it's by Bertolt Brecht. So, who built the 7 gates of Thebes? The books are filled with the names of kings. Was it kings who hauled the craggy rocks of stone? And Babylon, so many times destroyed? Who built the city up each time? In which of Lima's houses, that city glittering with gold, lived those who built it? In the evening, when the Chinese war was finished, where did the masons go? Imperial Rome is full of arcs of triumph. Who reared them up? Over whom did the Caesars triumph? Byzantium lives in song. Were all her dwellings palaces? And even in Atlantis of the legend, the night the sea rushed in, the droning men still bellowed for their slaves. Young Alexander conquered India. He alone? Caesar built the Gauls. Was there not even a cook in his army? Philip of Spain wept as his fleet was sunk and destroyed. Were there no other tears? Frederick the Great triumphed in the 7 Years' War. Who triumphed with him? Each page of victory, at whose expense the victory bore. Every 10 years a great man. Who paid the piper? So many particulars, so many questions. Thank you. Happy May Day.
Thank you so much, Maxine, honestly, and thanks for that reading, and thanks for the disclaimer at the beginning. You brought us into the modern world, but that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. And no worries if you have to leave us. Our gratitude is extended to you, and you can leave at any point. We are here on May Day, obviously, and the other contributors. I just want to kind of hear from you really about what May Day means to you. Jerry, I don't know what you would usually be doing on May Day. Would you be taken to the streets? Or
I'd be in a raucous gay bar, really having a wild time now. If it was a normal May Day, and if in my past May Days, because I come from Liverpool and a very industrialised area of Liverpool, every bank holiday was like New Year's Eve. So this would be like that. So I always remember that kind of energy, the pub energy, if you like.
And Jeremy, what would you usually be doing? Would you be speaking at Trafalgar Square or?
Yeah, generally I'd be on the May Day march, and it used to assemble, the London one used to assemble in Highbury Fields, and then it moved to outside Marx Memorial Library on Clerkenwell Green. I'd be there, march through to Trafalgar Square, and it was kind of a wonderful occasion because you'd meet a lot of people you hadn't seen for a very long time, and then you'd have the rally and so on, and then I would go to a cafe, a small cafe on Charing Cross Road to catch up with people after that. So to me, it's a kind of tradition for May Day to be out and about seeing people. So this May Day is a bit on the old side, but you know what? There's probably more people joining in May Day events around the country this year than there are other years. I mean, this morning I did a May Day call for Shrewsbury Trades Council in Shropshire. They wanted me to come there this year, but obviously nobody's going anywhere at the minute. And then I'm doing Manchester May Day rally tomorrow, as well as this is the third event I've done today. So I'm getting very used to Zoom. I quite like Zoom. But in between that, I've been to a food bank, and it was on Newington Green in my area, which is lovely. And that is where Mary Wollstonecraft lived. And we went outside the Unitarian Church where Mary Wollstonecraft used to worship. And just across the road is the site of the girls' school. And that, of course, is where she got the inspiration to write the Treatise on the Rights of Women, which is, of course, a challenge to the rights of man, which was written only a couple of miles away at the Angel in Islington. So I always have this sense of history whenever I'm around there. And so today's been interesting, going out in the constituency, talking to people at the food banks and things, but also just at obviously appropriate distance, meeting people on the street. And you know what? There's a lot of stress out there. Stress about jobs, stress about future. And the point you made at the beginning, Laura, about yes, we've got somewhere to live, and we have a house, we have a small garden, and it's irritating having to be at home a lot when there's lots of things I like to be doing, but you know, it's not too bad. But if you're in a small flat with no balcony and you've got 3 or 4 children and only 1 or 2 bedrooms, life is not that simple, and the stress levels are huge. And I feel for the young people who want to be outside, want to be socializing on the streets and things.
And I don't know, Loki, do you usually do anything for May Day? Do you usually take part in the celebrations?
Yes. Yeah, I would try to. But like Jeremy said, I would try to get out there and meet people and stuff like that. But I think the important thing to always try and emphasize at this time to people is that history is the product of a relationship. If it were not for working people collectivizing and struggling, you would not have sick pay in this country. You would not have maternity leave. You would not have put an end to children working. You would not put a situation where the parameters of the logic of those who are powerful in society are defined to some extent by the people that create the wealth within it. It's about understanding who are the lungs, the heart, and the spine of any society. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to get that message out there and remind people, especially in a situation when we're on the brink of an economic crisis, which there's estimates that say 1.6 billion people are going to be out of jobs. That's half of the entire working population on this planet. 3.3 billion people. You know, we're in a situation where in the United States, 30 million people are now without jobs. We have to understand the opportunities that exist in front of us and the 2 different directions we can take. We can take a direction which leads us to more of the same of the last 10 years, which will lead to a greater loss of life, a greater immiseration of people's situations, or we can take a route which centers at it that understanding of how society functions and runs on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely right. I don't know, Maxine, before you have to shoot off, if you want to say anything else about what May Day means to you, what you would ordinarily do.
I'd be down normally at Bexley Square in Salford, the May Day rally down there. In fact, I'd seen a picture today, and some sort of more hardcore comrades have been down there doing social distancing. But it's quite a historic site in Salford, and famously Jimmy Miller before he became Hugh McCall was down there, and Eddie Frow, Ruth and Eddie Frow, who started the Working Class Movement Library. I think the stories of him getting bopped in the face of the policemen down there when they used to have they had the riots down there during, the beginning, end of the Depression. So it's a great place, and Salford's got such a fantastic political progressive history. I think Manchester sometimes hijacks some of it when it's actually, Salford. So yeah, I'd be down there. It's a great celebration, and then we'd all at the Eagle pub and go and have a few drinks at some nice little pubs, or the New Oxford down there. But it's great that it's still commemorated, the events of Bexley Square, and that people still get out on May Day. But it should still be a celebration, and it's like Loki said, it's about constantly reminding people, the achievement of the working class, what we have achieved, and if we forget our history, then we'll never move forward. And we have achieved so much, and I think it's hard this climate sometimes to remember that there have been great triumphs. We just feel like we're being squashed and squashed and squashed. But unity, strength, we can do it.
And you just have, as a working class person, you just have the confidence often battered out of you, either, with physical violence sometimes, but, just the demeaning of our collective contributions to the world, just erased, not taught. And that is a great shame. And one of the things that we must do is make sure that we immerse ourselves in working class history and what working class people have achieved. And one of the things that I found ironic, painful, a bit disgusting actually from this week was, members of the kind of Conservative cabinet taking part in the minute silence on Workers' Memorial Day, when their kind of ideology, their free market ideology, is what places workers in harm's way, and the mass exploitation that takes place. Workers are exploited every single day, and to kind of stand there in silence kind of felt like occupying a space, working class people's culture and history, and it didn't feel right to me. I want to move on now to Jerry. Thank you so much, Maxine. To Jerry Potter. Jerry, you're a poet, playwright, director, actor, and this is quite a big accolade. The National Museum lists you as a leading LGBTQ plus icon, and you are going to perform a couple of poems for us tonight. So over to you, Jerry. Really
Thank you
great
very
to have
much.
you here.
It's not the National Museum, it's the Liverpool Museum, not the National.
Oh, sorry.
I much prefer it being the Liverpool Museum.
We'll upgrade.
A couple of poems from my latest book called Manchester Isn't the Greatest City in the World, The Rise and Rise of the Bourgeois Zeitgeist. Now, Manchester, don't pick on me because it's a love letter to you, but if you're the bourgeois zeitgeist, I'm after your ass, okay? So remember that. So this is, I was never the biggest fan of the Smiths, but I really got Morrissey. I really got that he was this vibrant lyricist, this flamboyant romantic figure. And how he really attached himself to a really wonderful sort of group of disparate and, needing young people. But I really went off when, in my opinion, he started to galvanize the right wing, the far right. So this is about that. This is called The Morrissey Factor, or Manchester Has Born a Martyr. Cobbles have turned upside down. Elsie's a deeper shade of blues on rouge. Rita's hushed. Youth has gone. Around the fountains really been ring-fenced. Is it about keeping them out? Whoever them and out is. English-Irish starts with immigration. Bleeding hearts starved on famine boats. Is it the where we belong? The who we are, the why we've been and are going to? Hateful's hollow, an unbone drag, an empty pill to swallow. D'Alessandro can only silent what's left to say when there's too much said. Heaven knows what's different, what's miserable now. So here's to you, Tommy Robinson. Jesus forgives you more than you will know, apparently. Before Sheila took a final, she painted a backstreet multicultural, a Manchester of questionable sea, of how now is soon far away, charming that man, then. Well, the last of the gang shut that unstable door, were met in murder when we choose to forget. Right? And this next one is very much about the NHS, and it kind of spans two difficult moments. One was the AIDS crisis in the 1990s, which is where the title of the poem comes from. And it was in the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, where I saw remarkable doctors, but more nurses dealing with dying young men in a way that I've never ever forgotten, and is still in my heart. But they had these amazing counselling skills, but I was so moved by how quickly they moved their hands. I was so fascinated by that. So like doing bloods or intricate machinery and stuff like that. So it comes from there. And Julie Hesmond asked me to write something for the 70th anniversary of the NHS. So I did it for her Take Back thing, which was lovely. And now it's in this place where we are now. And it's dedicated to everybody, every key worker, but particularly the NHS and particularly nurses. It's called, and to their hands, it's called Those Fingers. Those fingers, sheepfolding, bedside mannered and rolling, occasionally maybe scolding, running along the crease. Those fingers never cease, warring bodies needing peace. Those fingers administer release from pain. Those fingers, time and time again, tireless, priceless, trained, targeted, aimed. Those fingers, intricately humane and stitching. Switching from one role to another. Those fingers, sister, auntie, father, mother. Those fingers smother, brother. And no matter other, those fingers offer handfuls of hope. The scope to cope and chill. Those fingers dishing out potion and pill. Those fingers fast. Those fingers still. Friends, cleanse, kin, boss, win, loss. Those fingers see you through. Flu jab, brew. Never the don't when doing the do. Those fingers, 5 decades saving lives, soothing hives and mind. Those fingers thrive in living, selflessly giving. Those fingers, kind. Brow mopped, never stopped, wiping bottoms, tops, transplanting organs, cleaning slops. Those fingers filling holes, full of drive and goals. Never half-hearted, getting stopped, heart started, cheeks parted, thermometer in, vomiter, bold. Those fingers young, middle-aged, old, often warm, occasionally cold. Those fingers on fire. Inspire, take society higher, seemingly never tire. Hands shaken with life-saving thanks, shouldn't be using food banks. Those fingers often thwarted, positions distorted, misreported, must always be supported. And after all they've done, all they've saved, sorted, must never be deported. Those fingers birth, those fingers death, close eyes, first breath, new moon, sunset, entering the world, simply the best, guiding the old, baby to breast.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely unbelievable. I know that there will be collective thousands of hands clapping right now. Jerry, I mean, I feel quite moved actually. And I know what you mean about, you know, unfortunately before my dad passed away and he spent a week in intensive care, and I was just like absolutely fascinated with watching the nurses, and like it's hypnotic, isn't it? The kind of
it's incredible how many things they know. And this is something, I mean, I think there's something to do with how we don't understand care. We just think care is care, but the amount of meticulous understanding that care is, and the skill bases, and you know, nurses now, even far more than then, are much more machine conscious and you know, internet. Oh, it's such a massive skill base, and we don't recognize it. And I remember just being so transfixed, almost hypnotized by the speed of. But whilst at the same time, they were being incredibly counselling to people who were dying and to their families. It's a remarkable set of skills.
Absolutely right. And you know, everything from the cup of tea, as you mentioned, to making my dad smell nice, to
Yes.
highly complex procedures, and quite right too. I think interaction with the National Health Service is a radicalising factor, actually, because you cannot believe that those people would then be at a food bank, as you quite rightly pointed out. And as I'm sat here, Jerry, thinking about the system, thinking about the privatisation, decimation of the NHS, and the kind of brutalisation of lots of those workers, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the fact that, I mean, oh God, this is going to sound terrible, but I think we're sort of in a kind of state of political entropy, particularly with this government. So we seem to be sort of running down. I mean, this government is famous for running down the clock, but it seems as if the clock is running down. And I think there must be a moment, an impact moment. I mean, where we actually go, right, this has to be it. I'm a bit like, so I call myself an anarcho-socialist. So I'm all a bit revolutionary in my, I have a revolutionary vibe. So I'm hoping, I don't mean we burn down the Houses of Parliament. Sorry, Jeremy. But, you know, but we actually do come out of this with a much more sort of focused working class voice. And I don't like the phrase, but underclass voice, because we have to, with the distance between even the working class and the so-called underclass is huge now. The constant, I call it the distance actually, the constant chasms with this fiscal apartheid that we're living under is phenomenal. So I just hope there's something that, for me, the hope is that there's a kind of surging togetherness.
And just to let you know, there's thousands of people watching this, and that is incredible. Thousands of people just heard that poem, but we want thousands more to see this. So just, it takes about a second, press share, because people can watch this once it's over. They can watch this, you know, maybe if they're feeling a bit low or a bit lonely and they want a connection to other people and to a movement, they can put this on. Maxine, you're still here, so I'm coming back to you. What gives you hope? What is giving you hope about our future?
It is the human race, isn't it, that gives us hope. You know, I think I feel the same. I still keep thinking there will be a crunch moment that people will go, enough is enough. And I think, is this the time, with reflection, when people come out of this? I think there's going to be huge change in all walks of life, in all industries. And it's hard, because sometimes that hope can wane sometimes, you know what I mean? And you can lose confidence, and you get frustrated with the people around you and the way people vote and the way people have been brainwashed and how the system works and it's against us, and, you know, the media. But I still think it's about little steps forward, isn't it? It's not always about the big victories. It's about chipping away, and knowing that there's events like this, knowing, you know, there's artists like Jerry and Loki. You know, Jeremy's still, you know, unfortunately not the Labour leader anymore, but he's, you know, still there fighting. And then there's the people who are watching this, and then there's just people who are doing everyday little changes who might not even see themselves as political. I think this is hopefully hoping, you know, this time will open people's hearts more, and a sense of us coming together. And I know in other, you know, there's it's not all the sort of, you know, gung-ho spirit, and it's difficult. It's really difficult. And, you know, I don't know. I think you've just got to keep believing in the human race, that we will, you know, things go around in cycles, don't they? You know, so I don't know.
And you're right about the chip analogy, because somebody once said to me, I was an anti-racism education worker, and shout out to Show Racism, the Red Card tonight, who I know lots of the team are watching, but somebody once said, imagine like a massive block of granite, and you just do not know what chip but somebody's consciousness is going to smash it all apart, and they will join you in the struggle, and they will see how they've been manipulated. I'm going to come to you, Loki, about hope, then Jeremy, and then we're going to hear you perform, Loki. So what's giving you hope?
Well, as we know, we're in a situation where the government downgraded the seriousness of the coronavirus. It just so happens at a similar time they made the realization that actually they didn't have enough PPE to properly look after NHS staff. I'm not saying those two things are related, but they seem to be something we should interrogate. We're now in a situation where over 100 staff have died in the NHS. You have NHS workers being threatened by their management within NHS trusts. And this is what happens when you incentivize cost-cutting within hospitals. Management seem more concerned with PR than saving people's lives, because people that have spoken about the shortage of PPE online have received threatening emails from their bosses. They've been told they may be dismissed. They've been told they may seek this. They may be subject to disciplinary action. So then the idea is, in the middle of a pandemic, you might have medical staff dismissed. Clearly, PR is more important than looking after people and saving people's lives. And that's what the profit logic that underlies a lot of this is about. You know, this is the greatest manifestation of the idea that neoliberalism kills people. We saw a situation where our Prime Minister said Britain would emerge like Superman out of the phone box at a time where other countries would do things. And he said this exact phrase, that were not medically rational, meaning they would seek to protect people rather than protect the economy, which is what he wanted to do. Now, let's be clear. They were receiving estimations about the amount of people that would die around 250,000. So what you're saying is that an increased death rate to the extent that that many people would die, if Britain could come out of it in an economically better off situation, if GDP wouldn't drop the way they feared, then it would be worth it. And part of that has been this lack of PPE. What gives me hope, though, is there's organizations like Coronavirus Frontline, Lemis Latif, and other NHS staff who are working to go to companies and try and get donations of PPE in order to give it to all key workers, not just NHS staff, but all key workers. It's people like that who you know, again, are operating in a very difficult situation, a very sensitive situation. They shouldn't have to do it. It's something that the state has the legal obligation to provide, right? And the state has shown lethal negligence to these people. But despite the fact that the state, the suicidal state, has hollowed itself out in this way, these people are seeking to protect other key workers. They're not only thinking about their lives in this situation. So it's those examples that do give me hope. You know, we can't forget that a rope is just strings interwoven. So that collective feeling, we have to, despite the physical distance that we have between each other, we have to continue to foster it and make absolutely clear that, like I said, the austerity that we saw from 2010, the horrific consequences of the Health and Social Care Act in 2012, if we are not careful, these big bailouts that have taken place, not nationalizations, but bailouts, have beneath them the very same logic. It's about moving assets from the public to the private and liabilities from the private to the public. And so we are going to have to really, really dig down and resist this.
Absolutely right. And I think that one of the, you know, when you try and think of solutions within this crisis, and you talked about people, you know, with all of the harm, all of the danger in front of them, and they still go out to help save lives, to deliver the post, to deliver food. And I think that it smashes apart the myth, really, that we've been kind of had shoved down our throat, that this is human nature, that we're actually quite selfish beings, that it's every person for themselves, and we've just got to look after our own. Human behavior right now in this crisis is showing the absolute opposite of that. There are absolutely no individual solutions to any of our problems, only collective ones. And Jeremy, before we hear Loki perform, what's given you hope?
Well, the strength of people and their determination to defend things like the National Health Service and that amazing sense of solidarity that's around now during this corona crisis. And I get hope from young people from their determination and their enthusiasm to give something to their communities, and also that sense of international solidarity that's there so often on so many occasions. Because we're often disempowered as people. Working class communities are deliberately disempowered. Our media deliberately disempowers people by fating celebrity and fating money and individual wealth over a collective achievement. And I think our role has to be to enjoy the culture we've got, extol the virtues of that culture. And I think this little event we're doing this evening, well, not so little, it's a very big event, where we're a combination of talks, but also of wonderful poetry. Thanks very much for that. And our big celebrations during the year, such as the Durham Miners Gala, the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival, the annual rally in Burston, and so many others around the country, are a joy to be at. They're a joy because of the culture that goes behind them. And you know what? Those kind of events are increasing as people are exploring their own history. As you know, I spend an awful lot of time traveling around the country, and I get given lots of books on local history and people that are exploring their own local history, how things happened, how things changed, and what brought them about. But it's also how our children in school learn their own history. They're told the National Health Service is there. Yeah, it is there. But why? How did it come about? How did it happen? And then we were taught about history as being this grand extravaganza of British or any other country's history. We're not always taught the other side of it. And so Dawn Butler and I worked very closely together to develop the idea of the Emancipation Education Trust, so that we could look at the real history of what the slave trade was about, what the real history of that colonial exploitation, particularly of West Africa, was about. And of course, linked to that was the trade and so on with the Caribbean, so that people are empowered by their understanding of history. So I get enormous hope from that. And I enjoy being a member of Parliament for my local community. I have been for a very long time. What I enjoy is that day-to-day interaction with people and all the issues that are facing them, but also that sense that communities are strong and can achieve things together. And I've got enormous hope for the future.
I don't know how you managed to stay so like young, Jeremy. I did 2.5 years in Parliament, and I aged about 30 years from the pressure. If you tell the truth in that place, people are coming after you.
Well, the key is you don't take yourself too seriously. That's important. But I've noticed, and it never happened to you, but I've noticed people come into Parliament, and they come in as normal human beings. And then after only 6 months or a year of having doors open for them and being addressed in a fairly respectful tone, start to develop their own tone of disdain towards those who work there. And it's quite horrible to see. And so I do think you've got to keep grounded. I remember a lovely event once, shortly after I've been elected. I went to a tenants meeting in a local estate. As you probably all know, my constituency is 5 miles away from Parliament, so it's not that difficult to get there. It doesn't take that long. I was at this tenants meeting, and it started about 7:30, and there was a lot of issues, and it went on and on and on. And quite honestly, many people were making exactly the same point and not listening to what anybody else was saying. And we kind of, I thought, got to the natural conclusion of this meeting. This was after about 2 hours. So I was ever so polite, ever so respectful. I said, "Excuse me, Chair, I'm really sorry, but I've got to go now." And they said, "Go where?" I said, "Well, I've got to go to Parliament because there's a vote there at 10 o'clock, which is like in half an hour's time." They said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, I've got to go to Westminster in order to vote on this bill that's coming up. It was a Tory government, I'd be voting against it." And they were completely unimpressed by this. And eventually, the chair of the meeting said, "Listen, Jeremy, when we all voted for you, only 2 months ago, you told us you were going to represent us. You didn't say anything about representing Westminster. You said you were representing us. So hang on, just explain, what are you going to do when you get there?" So we then had this fairly brief discussion, and they then finally agreed that it was reasonable for me to leave the meeting.
Yeah, to get the permission of the committee. And then if you actually tell them what you do when you get there, which is the most stupid system, you walk down a bloody corridor with hundreds of other people to say your name, and that's our voting system. They'll probably say, no, you can't go. I'm going to move on now, and I'm very...
Laura, history happened today. There was an online vote.
I know, so it is possible. They've come into the 21st century, yeah. So we're going to move on now, and I'm very, very, very excited about this. I am a huge fan of Loki. I'm not going to make any kind of, I'm not going to kind of cover that up in any way. And Loki is an activist and an artist. His albums include Dear Listener, Soundtrack to the Struggle, Soundtrack to the Struggle 2. If you've not heard these albums, please go and buy them and listen to them and listen to them again. They're incredible. They're motivating. I've seen Loki perform once. I've got tickets for his postponed tour as well. But your music's so inspiring, and it's so inspiring and consciousness raising, really critiquing, dismantling the system, and so eloquently telling us that it doesn't need to be like this. I'm going to hand over to you now, Loki.
Thank you so much for that, Laura. I am also a big fan of you. So I'm going to do this poem. It's untitled at the moment. It's about time I broke the silence on the coronavirus. For those with open eyelids, there should be no surprises. We are now witnessing the death of a system when nurses are sent to work without protective equipment. Warning since last year, we should have been more prepared. We all know it would have been different if it was Corbyn there. Now, if you're coughing in public, you get awkward stares. Love to all of those suffering, you're in our thoughts and prayers. It's depressing. When they should have been investing in tests for all, they calculated the collateral. These deaths were preventable. If you see the evidence, you might believe that he's malevolent. What these people represent is deceit and lethal negligence, the fraudulent sort. Tories clapping for the NHS is like a murderer applauding the corpse. Want to be eugenicists, get stuffed with the herd immunity. As you can see, it's the murderous cuts that hurt communities. Stay well, stay free. Lockdown is the state of mind, but choking on your lungs is such a painful way to die. Whether you're from Battersea or Baza, or from Amman or Canada, from Aberdeen or Africa, Camden or Addis Ababa, there's a lesson in every crevice of this pandemic. Salute to the medics, your presence is angelic. I hope the words I write can fertilize and nurture your mind. Hospital staff aren't heroes, they are workers with rights. I hope even these circumstances they can organize in strength, because the word hero can only normalize their deaths. It's morbid, but these fraudsters want to corporatize this mess. People deserve far more than this tortured life of stress. It's hard to grasp that nobody is laughing last. I shed a tear for all the NHS staff that passed. Learn about their pain. Better yet, learn to pronounce their names. If you think you got more in common with Boris, you're out your brain. Don't forget, some see disasters as extreme earners. Make sure you wash your hands and eat your food from a clean surface. The elites seem nervous. It's them that need purpose. Yesterday, they called you unskilled. Today, they call you key workers. It's a dead cert. Before they get better, things will get worse. Death hurts more when they ignore the experts' agendas and lectures into this. They sent us head first. What can the Prime Minister say to the family of a dead nurse? Power to those that sweep the streets with more knowledge than PhDs. Power to those that keep their keys, return as promised, please believe. Power to those that suffer in silence, those it hurts to hear. Power to those that hold their ground. Power to those that persevere. Power to those that love humanity more than they love style. Power to immigrants probably raising Donald Trump's child. Thank you very much.
Wow, absolutely incredible. And there will be thousands and thousands and thousands of people cheering you there, Loki. I mean, I wish I could just have the transcript to devour it again. Absolutely incredible. And I think there is a sense, isn't there, that from this crisis, we can't go back. I think there are two ways we can go. And you outlined some of those in the preamble and in what you just performed. But, you know, how do we, as activists, get engaged? How do we get active? Like, what would you say to people, Loki, that are sat at home right now thinking, I don't know what to do. I'm sensing something's wrong here. How would you turn people onto that? Obviously, other than listening to all of your albums, but that another system is possible.
I would say the most important thing is to understand the power of collective energy, is to take what is personal pain and convert it into collective power. And that's what really, you know, we're trying to do with this meeting and other meetings of that sort, is to understand where your resources lie. So with the example of the coronavirus frontline project that Lamise Latif is running, she's realized that in her position, if she approaches companies or she approaches individuals and she says, look, we need the PPE, we don't have it at the moment. If you're in a situation where you can attempt to ameliorate some of these issues, you know, we have situations where construction workers are being told they have to go and work in this situation, are being told they have to go and risk their lives. Non-essential work should not be taking place right now. The entire relationship between government, the public, and the economy needs to be reconfigured coming out of this. And the idea, you know, they say politics is the art of the possible, but the idea of what is politically possible now has been blown wide open. We have arguments that were being made in December, which I'm sure all of us mobilized to the best of our ability to try and see materialize as policy. These policies now are seen as commonsensical. Why? Because conditions have changed. But what we have to do is we have to emphasize the importance of struggling for that. We should not be in a situation where anyone is congratulating the government on a great piece of work. This has been lethal negligence. People died that didn't have to die. We need to continue to emphasize that point. When we see these aesthetic gestures of people clapping on doorsteps, we support the public doing that, and the public to NHS relationship is clear. But let's not mess around. By November, you had the NHS bed capacity at the lowest it had ever been at any point in history. You know, the press have gone to great lengths to try and Churchillize Boris Johnson. Well, one thing they seem to have in common is that Winston Churchill opposed the idea of the NHS when it was founded in the late 40s. Boris Johnson has been aligned to a political movement which has attempted to destroy that institution, to privatize it by stealth, which has privatized social care. We have seen the human cost of that. You cannot separate the deaths that we are seeing today from that idea and from that way of seeing the world. And also from the cuts that we have seen over these years. We cannot return. This has to be a never again moment.
Absolutely right. Absolutely no going back. And I think what's interesting is everybody talked about different things that people are doing, initiatives that people are taking from themselves. At the minute, lots of people are surviving without the state, nothing to do with what the state is providing or decisions that Boris Johnson has taken, but because of what communities are doing for themselves, the power that we have to do for ourselves. And you know, this has to be a kind of watershed moment. I think I could be completely wrong, but I liked what you were talking about in terms of taking that pain and using it for kind of a positive good. And I think the Latin for passion is pain, and very often when we feel kind of most aggrieved and most passionate about something, it is painful, isn't it? And after this crisis, when we emerge from this crisis, there's going to be an unleashing of grief and pain, and as a movement we're going to have to put that somewhere, and we're going to have to put it for positive change, for a different system. There are so many positive comments, by the way, about that performance and about all of the other panelists. People are saying, Loki, you just nailed it. Thanks, so good. People are even swearing about how good it was. But people are really, really enjoying this program. So if you can, please share, so as many people as possible can see it. And I know I say this all of the time, but please tag someone in that wouldn't ordinarily look at any kind of political content. We are very interested in speaking to people who haven't yet thought about the system in a different way, because, and this is where we'll move on and kind of move to our concluding speaker, but we have to face up to the fact that there are lots of people still who are saying, just get on with it, stop criticizing the government, just, you know, we've all got to pull together. And before I go to Jeremy, I just want to hear from you, Jerry, and you, Loki, what you would say to people, as if we've not said enough already, But what would you say to people who say, stop being political about this crisis?
Well, I would say, I'd say in the nicest possible way, and try not to be too scouse about it, but I would say they weren't talking a truth, basically. And I would try and point them to a particular set of truths. So, for example, the NHS service, and I would say without great political conversations that we had in the past and debates and whatever it was, we wouldn't have it. We have to look at the great big moments that we've created as a movement, as a group of people, and I would point them at that, basically. I would also say, look to what's left of our counterculture and try and get involved, because there's still a really lovely sense of urgency, the urgency of art, and for art to try and make some other sense of this, which isn't just sometimes I think politics is, it's wonderful and it is necessary, but it is weighty and dense in sometimes a language that people sometimes can't approach. So often for example, I'm from a poetry arena, an acting arena. So if you find your way into those lovely little nooks and crannies where these little places are, you will hear people just like you, talking like you, a bit rhymey, a bit in rhyme, but they were talking like you about the things that you feel. So connect with that, with the counterculture, with the underground of thought, as well as the overground of thought.
And what about you, Loki? What would you say to people who are saying, oh, I just want to get on with this, I just want to kind of, I don't want to hear about politics? What are you saying to them? Why be political at this point in time?
Well, the fact that the government were forced by public pressure into the lockdown position was political. The fact that Boris Johnson in early February was talking and comparing Britain to a Superman coming out of the phone box to be an economic success in comparison to other countries is political. The fact that they kept people exposed to danger for as long as possible is political. The fact that people do not have protective gear that are working in very sensitive positions is political. All of these things cannot be separated from their root. And so that's what I would say, is that you can't divide this situation from politics. The fact that Germany has a far higher beds per 100,000 people in comparison to us and has a lower death rate. This is, the fact, exercise Cygnus in 2016, the government ran a drill to see how well the NHS could react to a pandemic. And what they found is because of lack of PPE, lack of ventilators, lack of beds, lack of nurses, the results would be catastrophic. The fact that that report was sat upon and not reacted to by the levers of power is political. We are here because of political decisions which led to people's deaths.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, I know when I felt at my most insecure, most vulnerable, you want to look for safety. And I think often in this crisis, people have been looking for that comfort and that safety, and God, is just somebody looking after me. But we as communities can look after each other. It doesn't mean, we provide each other through our solidarity, that sense of safety, that love that we need to carry on. We're not going to get it from the government. That's just not where our sense of security is going to come from. I'm going to give you an online first now. We've got Jeremy Corbyn here. He was, the Member of Parliament for Islington North since 1983, leader of the Labour Party between 2015 and 2020. And you're going to do a song for us, aren't you, Jeremy?
No.
You're going to sing for us, aren't you?
No, you came up with this one earlier.
I'm using the joke twice.
I thought we were going to have some music coming on, because I had some great stuff sent to me today, including a group of Spanish people singing the Internationale, and with various people in different places in different countries, and they came together for the grand finale. Absolutely fantastic.
So no songs from Jeremy Corbyn tonight, but you are going to talk to us.
Listen, we've got a few minutes to go. You wouldn't want everyone leaving early when I start. And so sadly, no, probably gratefully not. But I love music, and I love the principles of music that make people think. I have music on all the time at home, and I love all kinds of music. I really do. So, but I'm not at all musical. Does that make sense?
It's a bit like me. You know, I absolutely love music.
Can I say a big thank you to Loki as well for what he just said about people and security, but also what he's done to keep such strength and such solidarity with Grenfell and the people around Grenfell, and made sure that the rest of the community will never forget that dreadful night, but also that sense of community in Grenfell that had been so ignored, brutally ignored by a very, very wealthy local authority in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And so it's the most grotesque levels of inequality you can see anywhere in the world between that ward and nearby. Well done, Loki. Thank you for everything you've done on that. Whenever I go there, you're always there. Well done, my friend. And also well done for all your work for the peace movement over the years.
Thank you very much.
It's lovely being on with Maxine. She's an old friend, and I think she's fantastic. What she didn't tell you was, you know, you said she'd been on all these famous programs, in all these theatres and all these stages. She didn't tell you that she and I canvassed a Peabody estate together in London in the general election in 2017. Fantastic. What a wonderful woman, what a wonderful campaigner. And her ability to talk to people, to empathise and empower people is fantastic. And Jerry, you're in the great tradition of the Liverpool poets. It's brilliant. And you know what? Poets often tell the truth. They tell truths in funny kinds of ways. And I have a lot of poetry books, and people send me a lot of poetry books, and a lot of young people write poetry. And you know what it is? When the kids are in primary school, they write poetry. Then they become a bit self-conscious of saying they write poetry. And then in secondary school, they kind of write it in secret. And as they get older, they deny they ever wrote any poetry. But you know what? They always keep it. So when you say to an adult, do you ever write poetry? They always start, no. And they say, I bet you did. And then eventually it comes out. And I've got lots of poetry books that people have sent me. Absolutely fascinating. And as you know, most of my speeches, I quote a poet, often Shelley, because I've got such admiration for Shelley's work and his zany way of looking at things. Can I just finish with a few thoughts, Laura? Is that all right?
Go for it, Jeremy. Yeah. No, it's fine. Go for it. I'm just listening in.
I've never known you so quiet before. You've not completed yourself.
Go for it, Jeremy. Give us your rally cry, your closing thoughts.
Okay, I'll say this. Listen, around the world, people are celebrating May Day today in lots of ways, but pretty well everybody's doing it is in lockdown mode because of that. That's the situation we're in. But it's not equal. It's not equal in this country. It's not equal between countries. It's not equal around the world. If coronavirus spreads to a refugee camp in Bangladesh of Rohingya people, it is devastating because there's nobody to support them, or very few people, and there's no possibility of social isolation. If coronavirus spreads to a very crowded urban area in West Africa with a very limited health facility, it's devastating in every conceivable way. And it's very, very frightening for the people there. We were warned about corona in January by the World Health Organization. They then upscaled that warning to epidemic. Then they upscaled it to pandemic. And what was the response of thoughtful people in our government? Was they developed the idea of herd immunity. The idea that the herd gets infected, the weakest die because they're infected and can't cope with it, and the strongest survive. It's utter nonsense. Surely our principles as human beings are we do things together and we support each other. And we want to save each other's lives. They missed the chance on testing. They missed the chance on PPE. And with, as Loki pointed out, in December, our NHS beds were 94% occupied. In other words, only 6% of the beds in the entire NHS were vacant at that time. And in the care sector, it was worse. It was 1 million people waiting to go into social care. I have a weekly call with my local hospital and local authority, and we talk through all these issues. 10 years of austerity, 10 years of the richest getting richest, the poorest getting poorer, and our services being underfunded. We're paying a price. When we get through this corona crisis, it won't be because of the great thought process of those in government. It'll be because of the cleaners, the care workers, the nurses, the doctors, the surgeons, the consultants, the train drivers, the bus drivers, the mail delivery workers, the shelf stackers in hospitals, as well as in hospital stores, as well as those in supermarkets. It's going to be all those grades. And I said at the last Prime Minister's question time, I said, who's more valuable in this crisis? A cleaner who's keeping us safe, or a hedge fund manager who's trying to fleece the National Health Service? I think we all know the answer to that. And so on this May Day, this International Workers' Day, let's remember that these inequalities are human-made. Let's not let them attack the World Health Organization for telling governments all around the world some uncomfortable truths. We have a National Health Service because we achieved it, we fought for it, and we've got it. They want, not the World Health Organization, but many financial institutions, what do they want? Insurance-based or private healthcare in countries all around the world to turn health into a commodity. Health is not a commodity, it's a right. Education should not be a commodity, it should be a right. Those are all the issues that we put forward in our election campaign in 2017 and 2019. This May Day, we're locked down, we're talking to each other on Zoom, but we can inspire each other on Zoom and all the other methods of contacting each other. We can be in touch and we can above all empower people. So let's come out of this crisis, not going into austerity like we did after the financial crisis, where we took the money away from the councils, took the money away from the hospitals, took the money away from the youth centres, the education service and everything else. Let's build a country and a society fit for the next generation and learn from our own history and have real solidarity around the world. Our world is in peril from injustice, in peril from inequality, in peril from the environmental crisis. We don't get out of that by frightening each other. We get out of that by working together with each other to develop a green industrial revolution, to create a society fit for the next generation. So if nothing else, this crisis has taught us how much we need each other and how much we need our solidarity, that working class solidarity that built the NHS and will build that brighter tomorrow. Today, I think this call has been great. Matt Wilgris just sent me a text as we were during the call. That's why I was looking away from the screen for a moment. And he said the last conversation he had with Tony Benn, not long before he died, was, "I'm so looking forward to May Day." May Day is the day that brings us together. May there be many more May Days brought together with that strength, that hope, and that determination. And next year, not on Zoom, let's be out in the streets.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Never have I wanted to be like marching so much with thousands of other people as I have today to be, because Zoom's fine, isn't it? But it's no patch on seeing people in the flesh. Look, thank you so much to Maxine Peake, to Jerry Potter, to Loki, to Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy, lots of people are saying you're the best Prime Minister we never had. I agree with that. How different things could be. How different things could be if Bernie Sanders was still in the running in America too. A different system seemed so possible. It is still possible, however, and it is ours for the making. There's so much to be angry about, but all of that anger together as a collective is so powerful. So please keep the faith on May Day and every other day. Our spirit can't be crushed. The future's ours to make. The power is ours. Our hope is everlasting. Please join us on the 7th of May, so it's Thursday coming up, for a mass rally. We're going to take over the internet. The movement's taken over the internet to place our demand for what kind of society we want coming out of this global pandemic. No going back to normal. That's number one. We're not going back to normal. Normal created the fragility in the system. and has caused so much pain and suffering. So thanks for watching. Like the People's Assembly, go and listen to Loki, go and watch Jerry Potter's poetry, go and listen to some past speeches from Jeremy Corbyn. Watch Shameless on box set while you're in lockdown. But most of all, stay safe. Much love, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Laura. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks.